I regard that period as a blessing. I learned so much about so many things, because, adversity is probably, well, it's certainly one of the best teachers, if not the best teacher. And it just depends on what you do with that adversity. Some people just cowered under the fear mongering, but there were those of us who didn't. We took the coldly calculating scientific approach, not the fear mongering scientism, the weaponization of the idea of science, which is what they did.
Right.
It was the appeal to authority fallacy on frickin' steroids, man.
Absolutely. It was on the appeal to authority fallacy on a global level. And, it's funny. After last week's Passio presentation, I went back and I started listening to the podcast. I'm starting from number 1. And he talks about, the way he talks about the physiology of the brain and how actually that when you go into a point where you're dominated by the R complex.
The what?
The reptilian complex, the lowest brain level. He said, well, first of all, he talks about the reptilian complex, the first level, the brute survival level. Then he talks about the limbic system, the emotional. Then he talks about the neocortex. And then he talks about how if your right brain, if your left brain bullied, then what happens is you devolve into being like a brute survival level. You bypass if you're left brain bullied and you become imbalanced and you don't access your right brain, what happens is you devolve into the R complex, kind of a brute survival. But if you're right brain bullied, you hook into the limbic system. And the limbic system is the pure emotional center. Look at all the stuff, what's happening with the so-called trans and all these people who are all emotional, about, all these, all the people who are demonstrating about trans and climate and, all the current things. They're completely dominated by the limbic system aspect of the brain. They cannot access they can't access their neocortex. Just like in the same way, the people who bought into the whole scamdemic, they can't access anything higher than the reptilian, the R complex part of the brain. They can't go any higher than the brainstem. And that's why trying to discourse with them
futile.
Absolutely 1,000% futile until they can get out of that right, the R complex, until they can lose their fear-based mindset, and access the higher centers of the brain. But until they're bullied by fear, and the biggest fear really is fear of extinction, fear of death. Their concept, since if they don't understand that this is just our meat suit and that our consciousness lives on past this, if they don't really understand that at a pure visceral, if they don't understand that and know that at the deepest holistic level, then they're going to be prey to everything that these dark occultists put in front of them.